Hello and welcome, episode 4 of No Art School. I am joining you all after several attempts to record. This is another attempt, and I look forward to it because last night I put in a very decent amount of work to get a new style of gessoing started and then to just begin a painting over that. I'm working in grayscale for this one because after my first NYC Crit Club meeting, I was very much inspired to step away from inventing colors, and I'm working from photos for my Kentucky Derby series. And with this one, I was thinking, okay, let me stick to the original concept, but flip it on its head. As a Libra, Sun, and Aries rising, those polarities are what I seek to balance in my day-to-day endeavors. Creatively, it's very much an impetus to dive in and to question reality, which is why I really like artists like Max Ernst and people who do practice Dadaism. And I also am painting in acrylic, which is a change for me because I've got this sense of I need to prove myself as an artist, and I paint with oil to kind of help me to feel like I'm building something. And I think it's like selling the idea to myself. I needed to sell myself on being a painter, and I needed to grow in ways that would allow for me to, it was like training with weights on, basically. I needed to train with weights on so that when I go to make an acrylic painting, it's like a flash in the pan, at least in my eyes, of, oh, I love this, and this captures this image, and this emotion is present. Because working with oil, it's like doing all of that with a blindfold on, in my opinion and experience. So I know that first, the gesso being swirly and crazy is a step away from tradition, something I'm doing a bit more boldly now. And then painting with acrylic is another aspect. But a third, which is something I've been doing since maybe the fall of 2018 when I was in Rome, is I've started painting with my right hand. I'm a native left-handed artist, and when I work with my right, it's usually because I'm getting a flare-up of carpal tunnel, which it's not diagnosed. I'd rather not get diagnosed because I think it would inhibit my belief that everything kind of comes and goes. It's kind of like, oh, the wrist is flaring up, I'm having too much sugar and white flour, as opposed to me just being like, okay, it's time to switch hands. I might take it so far and be like, oh, I'm doomed, I'll never paint another image again. So I work around my mental blocks of being a self-diagnosed hypochondriac, someone who believes that they're always ill. I do the opposite extreme to compensate for my fears, is oh, well, this is likely to happen, and it's just too much pressure on my wrist, it's carpal tunnel. By calling it what it is, it makes me less afraid of it. So with this one, I'm working from the image, and I'm very proud of it because I was posed by the visiting art critic from my first session with NYC Crit Club to phrase better my wish to portray more people of color in my artworks. And this is also something that came up with the nitpickers in my life who want me to succeed and, are having me kind of question. As far as constructive criticism, I think that raising questions is a great exercise because it sells me as an individual on my own ideas and or pushes me to say yes or no to certain things. It's questioning my integrity to be aware of what other people are sharing with me, because I think a lot of what reality is it morphs to our perspectives and what we know is right and wrong and what we choose to do. These are just my beliefs. But as for the name of the visiting artist, I'm trying to find her now. She gave very wonderful critical feedback. Her name is Kimia Klein, and she challenged me to dig deeper, basically, with why I want to paint people of color. And I I realized that it's because I'm missing the male lineage in my family. The history of my family is just, it's in the shadows. It's something that I'm not aware of, but it's so close to my everyday life and existence that I can't ignore it. And painting helps me to honor it. It helps me to see myself. It helps me to see, the past and who may have been, whether or not I needed to meet these people in my lifetime. I doubt it because I think the people who've stepped in as family have been wonderful, and they've shown me unconditional love and given me the true upbringing of like that Aquarian, it takes a village to raise a child principle that I am so grateful for. And in discussing this notion with my grandfather, who's not my paternal grandparent, but he was the first person who opened my mind to art. He helped me to feel like it was worth diving into and having an okay place to escape creatively was very rewarding growing up with such a vivid imagination. And it's funny because one of the first people I met at the Crit Club has the same date of birth as my own grandpa. So I just was like kind of magnetically drawn to that energy to be like, oh, it's a good sign. And then as far as this week is gone, I feel like a lot of the pressure is lightening for me. Other than that, I might just be striking back. I might just really have my fire back because it's been very hard for me without working. Like a traditional work environment has always helped me to feel needed or important. And I say that because it's like money and having the freedom to spend as I please, knowing that I worked for it. Those two things, knowing that I worked for it and then having the freedom, those are great reasons to work. But I really do feel like I was risking some kind of burnout that wouldn't have allowed for me to even create as I'm creating. I went through a phase of not creating, but I'll say that I'm past the hardest part of it as far as emotions go, because I feel like I owe it to myself to really give it a solid shot to achieve some dreams with art and at least strive for my best, giving it my very best. Today it's raining and I actually haven't gone to the studio. I spent all of yesterday there, which does not typically happen for me, but I think the painting with acrylics was truly like training with no weights on for the first time. I was there from like 9:30 till about 9 p.m. Didn't have enough water, so I'm paying for that today with a like hyper sugar tooth, which is just not so balanced. But in the big picture, it'll teach me to either get a water pitcher or to be sure that I'm like refilling. But I'm telling you, it's one of those the issues of like, I guess being privileged as an artist, like, oh, I don't want to go to the bathroom. I'm working on this layer and it's coming along so well. Like, I don't want to break up the flow of creation, but also I do want to be taking care of my body for the future. Simple things I think about. And as I'm painting this now and watching the playback, I would say one of the biggest challenges in painting with grayscale, being such a vibrant like color lover, is capturing the depth properly with a good use of gradient. So some of the gesso is dry, some of it wasn't when I started this work, but the process in itself was really beneficial because from where I'm at now, I guess you could see even the two paintings in the right corner and the left corner. There's a vast difference. And I'd say that it's also something I kind of struggle with is like creating space in my works to where not everything's pinned up on a wall in a painting. And with Dadaist expression, I do find that the works that I really respect the most have a sense of depth to them and place. One of the bits of feedback I gave another artist was, where are these figures? Because she had some characters that, you know, they didn't have any shadows. And that's one thing I learned from studying Da Vinci, is that if you are, or maybe it was Plato, but it was like if you're a true artist notices the object, but also the shadow it casts, because we, as artists, are communicating ideas about our lives. I can't find the word for it. It's evading me, but I want to say humanity, but it's like the relativity of time, like passing on from one lifetime and having presence in the current moment that you live in means that you take notice of things changing. And shadows are something that, you know, in a span of 12 hours, you see darkness to light to darkness, and 24 hours allows for 2 times of that kind of expansion, I guess, or rhythm with the planets. And I want to read through some of my notes, because the Kentucky Derby series specifically started about this time last year to a T. I was nearing the end of my art trip in Torino, and when I got back from Italy, Airbnb had mailed out a magazine, and this author, sorry, I'm so sleepy after this morning and trying to record this a few times. The author of the article actually went to Kentucky to get his research done, and his father, I believe, raced horses, or at least owned a horse or two. And it's kind of a devastating past, and I painted it at a time where I was very sad, which is why I think I compensated with the bright, vivid colors and the sense of movement, because I was in basically the same situation that I'm in now, like not working. At that time, I was, you know, I had a great friend who was allowing me to accumulate some debt, and I had like an old job that I was working a few days a week, but it didn't give me the sense of certainty that I'm still desiring. But at this point, I feel like I'm doing more and giving more of myself than expecting something in return, which is what I think I had to learn the lesson of, is like learning to not be so concerned with money, especially until I'm living, you know, with my legacy in mind, like what it is that I want to move forward with in this lifetime and leave behind for, you know, the descendants of my family. So art is a big one for me, because the physical works in themselves are able to be passed down throughout generations. Like, I remember growing up and having a watercolor with a cat in the restroom, and like an African woman and her child walking behind her. I think we had a few other works, but outside of that, like, we didn't have very many instruments. We had like a keyboard, violins from like elementary school. And I know that for my nieces and nephews, maybe children one day, I would like for them to see things and see them taking up space, because I feel like that's been a big lesson for me, is learning that it's okay for me to take up space. Like, even though I still work on the floor a lot of the time, I do get the sense that it's fine for me to have 4 walls to myself and to create until completion projects that in the past I was painting super small and drawing super small, and everything was as transient as I am now, with now being an exception, this current now. And I'm learning a lot from having space. A dedicated 4 walls actually is doing me a lot of justice. It's teaching me to continuously create with a sense of improving these aspects that I find hard in colorful paintings. Like, this current work has shown me definitely how far I've come as far as my dedication, my eye for creativity, my capacity to invest in myself. Like, I was scared this morning. I checked my bank account finally, but I think I'll be perfectly fine. I got my beautiful messages, my symbols of, like safety and being watched over spiritually. And at the same time, it's like when I go to look for work online, I just get this sense of like, I know better. So now I have to do better, like truly living in my integrity and making sure that I accept this time as it is, give it maybe the 6 months of like, okay, what's going to happen? Like, what can I do every day to make sure that I've done my best? Like, what can I do every week to make sure I've done my best? And for me, to be honest, if I'm making a single large scale work every week and reaching out to a bunch of people, that would be in my mind's eye, as far as I can see right now, me doing my best and like allowing for whoever to come through and trusting that each step of this process is an opening, just like a lotus, no mud, no lotus. But I think that the gravity of my lotuses can be a bit more easygoing at this time, because I've learned a lot over the past 5 years and, even 10. A friend and I are in touch after quite a gap in communication. And it's so nice to know that, like, we're at the core the same humorous, goofy individuals that we grew up being. But now we can have conversations that are like adult-like in nature. And even in my facing up to some of my fears and just learning that it's okay to be afraid, but I can still push through. I don't have to wait for Mercury to be direct. I don't have to wait for, a sunny day to just enjoy who I am and what I'm doing. Like, the activities might change on a day-to-day basis. When it's sunny, I might decide, okay, I'm going to wake up and do some yoga. I feel good. When it's rainy and gray, I might want to sleep in and snooze till 9. But I know that the small changes, like in general, getting up on the earlier side of the morning, my boyfriend and his friends, they wake up religiously on the weekends before 8 a.m. to watch soccer games and then go play. And it's been a beautiful reminder for me to not hide away inside and, suffocate from the stuffiness, but to really enjoy my life and to enjoy where I'm at. Like tonight, for instance, because I think, my relationship has allowed for me to appreciate media and culture a bit better. We're going to see a film at Metrograph, which is a really cute little like hipster yet very chic theater in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And it might become a weekly activity, checking out what's going on. Yeah, I think it's Made in Hong Kong tonight that we're seeing, and it looks really good. It's kind of like darker film. And with the astrology this weekend, I've heard very good things about what's to come as far as, conjunction on Sunday, Jupiter and Virgo. And then there's going to be, I might have that transit wrong, but even the full moon that's going to happen on Tuesday in Virgo is going to kind of ground whatever it is that we've been hammering and chiseling away at to perfect. I know that for me, next week will be really cool because it's mid. Okay, I'm back. I'm not sure where that stopped, but I'm just going to keep rolling with it. Next week is the mid-semester critique and feedback, and I'm looking forward to it because I plan to have as much of this grayscaled painting done because I really want to propel myself and, use this time to feel like a student. I didn't get into Cooper Union. I applied for the fall 2020 semester, and I think that what will serve me best is creating a body of work over the next year that represents who I am. And along the way, I might find massive successes that make me feel like I don't have to return to school unless if I truly, truly want to. And it's a full ride and, it's going to help me to achieve greater success as a painter. But I think that with that in mind, the steps I make along this journey will put me exactly where I need to be. Like whether or not I apply to school again, participate in critique club again, which I really would like to. So far, from this first setting, I felt very inspired. I went back on work. I had some footage of that, but I decided to postpone sharing it because it's definitely like reinvigorated. Like the ground isn't settled on the piece that I went back in and added some doodles for my sketchbook. But even like the ways that I want to use color moving forward and, compare, like the ability to explore mindfully what it is that I'm making with color, as opposed to just like slapping color here, there, adding this back, circling back around, because I've gotten comfortable painting in layers. And I actually got a few products today from the artist craftsman supply in my neighborhood. I did bring my own bag though, so I felt very good about it. But the first time in a minute that I've gotten an acrylic medium, and this is just a slow drying, one that'll give me the ability to really hone in on this grayscale. I might get detailed with some of the patterns because I love what these people are wearing in this image. Like, it was pre-Jim Crow, so everyone's dressed like very like Southern gentlemanly. And in the photo, it's interesting because one of the men is sitting on a Coca-Cola crate, and you could see that there's a garbage can nearby, and that around them there are white people. But I'm wondering if there was really segregation before Jim Crow. There are some things that I'm sure if you're watching this and you have some expertise, I'm happy to know whether the South was very much segregated before Jim Crow. I know that this was addressed in my history classes, but never hurts to gain information a second time. But as far as feeding my cultural needs and making sure that I'm doing as much as I can while I'm in New York, because there have been many moments up to now where I'm like, I don't know how much longer I'll stay, but like, truly, I could be in New York for the rest of my life. I might leave in a year. Like, I never really know. And I think that that's been based off of my like wanting to operate as an artist and not really putting the efforts in, and sitting around complaining and being like, when is breakthrough gonna happen? Not really getting that the breakthrough happens when I break through the shell that I made for myself, limiting my creative potential to working in an environment that's a traditional workplace where I clock in and sit and or stand and or operate as an entity of another company, another person's dream. And these are all things that I've heard before. If this is triggering you, maybe you need to hear this too. But like, I value my creative abilities and I'm grateful for them. Like, I know that my gifts are real and that I have gifts to share with the world, and I look forward to making artwork that allows for me to be seen. As vulnerable as it makes me, I know that I'm painting to be seen because of the lack of information that I have around my ancestry, the male lineage. A lot has come up for me as far as like, where have my boundaries been? Where does my anger come from? Where does my resentment come from? How have I allowed for my anger and my resentment to hold me back up till now? And I know that I've always kind of like focused on men with my works, and like really painting the nude female figure hasn't been something I've done on a large scale. So maybe that's next. And I've seen a few examples walking around Soho last week that really inspired me. And I know this weekend going to the cloisters will be a great experience because I get so inspired when I go to museums and see none of my like potential ancestors depicted in ways that are like portraiture. And I know that one of the artists brought up that if ever a black person is portrayed in art, they're disfigured. And this does come from a lot of tribal art and oceanic art, to where it's just like art was meant as metaphor, as symbol during religious ceremony, like for fertility, you wanted to accentuate certain features because you wanted, you know, your crops to return and you wanted the land to be bountiful. And art, in this context that I'm creating it, it's meant more of like a way to feel like I know who the people in my life were. Whether or not they were present, they still exist. I've done my research and looked at various census historically to see, you know, do I have any relatives that were in America? And there are many Swapshires, it turns out. But with my portrayal of these people who are just like patrons of the Kentucky Derby, as well as some of the racers, it's a sensation I get. When I look at the images, it's like I could feel their energy matching mine. I know that the races did happen in the South/Midwestern area. Like, Missouri is not very far from Kentucky. So having the opportunity to explore really gives me a sense of like guided following, like I'm following a path that is open for me to look into, and it feels good. It feels liberating, and I had so much fun working on this one. Like, I was listening to music actually, and this shirt that I'm wearing is super wrinkled, but it's one of my painting shirts, and I got it either in Paris at like one of those Euro thrift stores where you can spend like a single $1 on a vintage blouse, or else I got it from a former neighbor who was having like a vintage shop pop up. So it's super wrinkled, but just know that it was stored away for winter because it's a very light blouse, and I stained it with paint. So I was just kind of like, oops. And I do have this off stick that you can get at most art supply stores, and it's meant to remove oil paint from your clothing, even if it's been in there a few times for a while. But Kiss Off, KISS off. And it didn't work with this shirt. I also tried to get the sweat stains out using like some natural techniques. I tried everything from like chlorine-free bleach to aspirin, and just letting the shirt sit for like several days at a time at my apartment in Bushwick over last summer. Nothing worked. So I'm learning to appreciate what I have in new ways that allow for me to do what it is I gotta do. And back to this painting. So I used a few different shades of like what would be known as black and white, like Mars black, which is an earthier black tone. It comes out a bit more beige. Titanium white. And then I don't know the hue of black, but the ones I picked up today are different. I tried an oxide black, which I'm excited. I'm sure it's a bit more like charcoal. And then the white that I picked up is kind of like a creamier color. And it's called it's Naples Yellow Light. So I'll have to blend that down with some white. But it might give me more of like this old-timey feel to place this painting a bit more accurately. And a few notes that I got is to lean into the awkwardness and into my own individuality. And as you can see, this small painting on the left is one. I started it a little bit after a breakup from last year, and it was kind of like the Tower card from the traditional tarot deck. And I got it out and started working on it because I'm very much like happy in my relationship. I'm happy with the woman I've grown to be through my inner work, dating myself, and making sure that I'm emotionally aware of what I need. And it's allowed for me to move forward and have a very fulfilling romantic life outside of my like changes, drastic changes. And going back in on a work that kind of started out emotionally volatile and being able to say, okay, like I see myself as someone who has, the capacity to grow, evolve, and change. But communicating that through work is part of like why I am so grateful to be an artist and to call myself an artist. I went through a period where I didn't identify as an artist. I just, would say, oh, I want to be an artist someday. But it was honest, and it gave me time to approach my work with a sense of genuine curiosity, not obligation, not a sense of competitiveness, not a sense of people pleasing, which I did in very different areas of my life, setting out to be what other people wanted or needed around to make myself feel fulfilled. It didn't pay off, but it served me. It didn't lead me to where I wanted for my behind kissing, brown nosing to go. But I'm so grateful for the people who are in my life now, the people who were in my life to teach me these lessons. And for those who just weren't around, it's okay. Like, I understand that everyone's different. And I think that that's one of my superpowers is reading energy from a photo. So like, as I work through these images, I could see and maybe create a story around who these people were, even though they're depicted in a two-dimensional landscape that I cannot consciously visit in this lifetime. Through, my work of like having this abundant frequency of joy and, dancing, having a good time with myself, and then creating these images in grayscale, like in the same color form that they appear in a photo, it helps me out a lot. Like, the feedback I got from the Derby racers images is that like there's so much color and richness and storytelling in the landscape and in the horses, but in the actual jockeys themselves, they're kind of missing out on some of that. However, I did get positive feedback about my work. I guess it's something to work forward with, because a lot of times it's like I feel like I'm looking at something without wanting to really name it, or I'm developing some idea that really doesn't have any purpose outside of what I need to communicate. And maybe that's what I'll get some insight on this weekend, is like, who am I wanting to be, my 10 years from now self, that would honor this path and this process, this choice to spend the time working on my art and to not back away from the big scary unknown of being an artist, making a YouTube channel, having very few views, and knowing that like someone who's half dressed is getting the attention and they're getting the feedback from people who are spending time, whether consciously or unconsciously, watching whatever it is that they do. And I know that I've been very guarded about my process, and I've probably thought really unenthusiastically about what I create, which is why I'm just now reaching this point. So in this process of learning about myself and creating new works, original works, replicating famous works, it's all a journey into who I want to become and what I would like to leave behind. So I know that for my nieces and nephews, I would love for them to feel like they can achieve whatever it is that they'd like. I feel like my degree in philosophy and religion allowed for me to reach this perspective that, the world is my oyster, and truly any lesson that I'm experiencing can be a point of growth. And even in starting this work, it's like I could have done my usual abstract practice, which I came to earlier. I am an abstract painter. I paint forms in different colors and I allow for images to appear and I bring them up. And I feel like that's what an abstract technique is. So with these works where I'm painting from photos versus my new take on how to gesso, where I'm mixing in black and grays to the gesso itself, to the primer that's going on this loose canvas, it's definitely helping my process to evolve. And you know, it doesn't come out as purely as like buying a can of black gesso would. From what I researched online, it's like there are actual pigments in the formula of this gesso that make it the color that it is. So adding in a color is a dilution of, you know, pigment and its medium. But I know that it was cool to work with. Like, it wasn't dry when I started this painting, but what it allowed for me to do was in some areas like blend using what I had put down. And by the way, as I was working, like, I kept dripping all over the floor, and I was able to kind of like scrub it out with some water. But yeah, I'm learning boundaries as this transit goes on, and my Capricorn elements are being kind of like squared by Pluto, which is showing me how I can work in a way that honors myself and my spirit and the things I would like to leave behind. I am so exhausted. Maybe you can tell in this recording. I'm going to take a nap. I owe it to myself. And then I'm off to give Dame and Mari their gift, their painting of The Kiss. So I thank you very much for watching. And if you're interested, I get my information from Chris Witecki, which is Sirius, Sirius Joy, or Aquarian Insight, who is on Subscribestar. As well, The Peace Dealer is an all-time favorite. He had a few really positive readings. He's on YouTube. So thanks for listening. Bye.